Have you ever realized that staying silent can be louder than shouting? I once sat beside an elderly woman, 84 years old, as her adult children argued over where she should live, with them or in assisted care. They spoke quickly, emotionally, interrupting each other, never once asking what she wanted. And there she was, hands resting calmly in her lap, sipping tea, eyes soft, lips sealed. Later, I asked her why she didn't speak up. She smiled gently and said, "Because they weren't really talking to me. They were talking to their own fears. I just waited until they were ready to hear me." That moment never left me. Because it wasn't weakness, it was wisdom. And it made me realize something I've come to believe deeply after more than a decade working with older adults. Pretending not to know at the right moment is not ignorance. It's strength. It's grace. It's self-preservation wrapped in wisdom. In this video, I'm going to share with you 7 real-life situations where pretending to be stupid might actually be the smartest, strongest thing you can do. I know that sounds strange, but stay with me, because by the end, you'll see how these quiet moments of restraint can protect your peace, restore your dignity, and even empower the relationships you care most about. Let me ask you this. Have you ever been in a room where someone assumed you didn't understand simply because of your age? A young cashier slowly explaining how to use a touchscreen, or a neighbor offering help with something you've done for 40 years? Or worse, have your own children made major decisions for you, without even asking? You felt the urge to speak up, to correct them, to demand to be seen, but you didn't. You chose silence. And in that silence, you kept something powerful, your self-respect. That's not weakness. That's mastery. I remember Mr. Richard, a retired engineer I once worked with. His son tried to show him how to use a smart TV as if it were the man's first time seeing a screen. Richard smiled, nodded, said thanks, and then later that night, he connected his phone, streamed his favorite documentary, and didn't say a word about it. When I asked him why, he chuckled and said, "Let them underestimate you. It's easier to surprise them later." That kind of quiet confidence doesn't come from a textbook. It comes from living long enough to know that not everything deserves a reaction. That sometimes, the wisest response is no response at all. And that's exactly what this video is about. In the next few minutes, I'll walk you through 7 powerful situations where pretending to be unaware or choosing not to react can protect your emotional energy, deepen your relationships, and elevate your self-worth. These aren't psychological tricks. These are time-tested life strategies drawn from real stories, real people, and real wisdom like yours. And when we reach situation number 6, I'll share one of the most unexpected truths I've learned about aging and how saying less often brings more peace. So if you've ever found yourself biting your tongue just to keep the family together, or staying quiet when someone insulted your intelligence, or pretending not to notice when others made decisions without you, then please, don't just watch, feel this video. If you've ever kept silent not out of fear, but out of strength, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. Drop your thoughts below. What did staying quiet teach you? And if any part of this message resonates with you, please like this video and subscribe. Your support helps us reach more people with stories that matter. Because this isn't just a video, it's a gentle reminder that peace, in your later years, is not something you stumble into. It's something you choose every single day. Now, let's begin with the first situation, one that might hit close to home, when your loved ones make decisions about your life, without even asking you first. 1. When your family makes decisions without asking you. Have you ever been left out of a conversation about your own life? Imagine sitting in the next room while your children gather to discuss whether you should move in with them, hire a caregiver, or give up your home. They speak with urgency, with concern, maybe even with love, but somehow, you're not part of the conversation. You weren't asked. You weren't included. And what stings the most isn't the decision itself, it's the unspoken message that your voice no longer matters. This happens far too often as we age. It's not always malicious. In fact, it often comes from love. But even well-meaning choices can feel like a quiet dismissal of our autonomy. I've seen it again and again over the years, grown children stepping in, making plans, drawing conclusions about their parents' needs, without taking the time to truly ask. One woman I knew, 73 years old, told me how her daughter had already arranged for her to sell her home and move into a retirement complex before she even knew there was a discussion happening. "They think they're protecting me," she said. "But what I needed was to be part of the decision." And she's right. Because when others decide for us, we're not just losing control over logistics, we're losing a piece of our dignity. It's normal to feel frustrated in these moments. Angry, even. You may want to shout, "This is my life." And yet, I've found that the most powerful response isn't always the loudest. Sometimes, it's the most composed. There is a kind of wisdom that comes with age, a recognition that reacting with fire doesn't always lead to understanding. And so, instead of confrontation, try this. Take a breath, steady your voice, and say something like, "I know you're concerned, and I appreciate that. But let's talk about this together." That one sentence does more than express your opinion. It invites collaboration. It reminds your loved ones that your perspective isn't optional, it's essential. And more importantly, it teaches them that respect can be requested without resistance. You see, pretending not to be offended, just for a moment, can be a form of strength, not surrender. It gives you time to reflect, to observe what's really behind their actions. Is it fear? Guilt? Love? And it allows you to step back into the conversation on your terms. In my work with seniors, I've seen how this kind of restraint becomes a quiet superpower. One man, a retired school principal, once told me, "I let my kids think they're in charge for a little while. Then I sit them down, and I let my experience speak for itself." That's not passivity, that's precision. And it works. Because when you speak from calm rather than conflict, people tend to listen more. They don't feel attacked. They don't shut down. They begin to see you not as someone to manage, but someone to consult. And that subtle shift can change everything. The truth is, you are still the author of your life. Age doesn't erase your ability to choose, to reason, to contribute. It only makes your insights deeper. But sometimes, to be heard, you have to let others feel they've been heard first. That's the paradox of wisdom. You give others the space to express their concerns, and in return, you earn the space to express your truth. If you've ever experienced this, being talked over, dismissed, or rearranged like furniture, know this: you are not powerless. Your silence can be strategic. Your words, when you choose to speak them, can carry the full weight of your experience. So hold your voice when needed, but never give it away. Because there's something deeply dignified about choosing when and how to respond. About showing your loved ones that behind every wrinkle is a story, a decision, a victory, and that even now, your voice matters. So the next time your family makes a plan without including you, don't feel erased. Step back in, with kindness, with clarity, and with calm confidence. You don't need to fight for control. You simply need to remind them, gently but firmly, that you've earned the right to be heard. And speaking of being underestimated, let's talk about another experience many of us know all too well. What happens when people assume that, because of your age, you don't understand or can't keep up. In the next section, we'll explore how to turn those moments of underestimation into quiet opportunities to surprise and empower not just others, but yourself. 2. When people underestimate your abilities. Have you ever been praised for doing something that you've been doing for 40 years? A young store clerk might smile as he slowly explains how to tap your card, assuming you've never seen a touchscreen. A neighbor might offer to help you carry a bag you've lifted 1,000 times before. Or maybe your own children jump in to assist before you even ask. These aren't moments of malice, they're moments of misjudgment. And while the people doing it may mean well, the result is the same. You feel small. It's a strange kind of invisibility. You're right there, capable, experienced, independent, but treated like someone fragile, or worse, incapable. That sting isn't just about the action, it's about what it implies. That somehow, with each birthday, your intelligence has faded, that your competence has expired, that your value has lessened. But here's the truth. Just because someone assumes you've slowed down doesn't mean you have. Just because they think you need help doesn't mean you're helpless. And just because they underestimate you doesn't mean you owe them a performance. Years ago, I met a retired nurse named Gloria. She was 79 and still volunteering at her community clinic. One day, a younger staff member began slowly explaining how to enter data into the system, speaking to her like a child. Gloria didn't correct him. She smiled, nodded, and let him finish. Later, while no one was watching, she quietly entered 36 patient records, faster and more accurately than anyone else that day. When I asked why she didn't speak up, she said, "Because I don't need to prove myself. I know who I am." That stayed with me. Because we often feel the urge to push back, to show them we're still sharp, still strong, still valuable. And that's completely valid. But here's the secret many wise elders already know. The most powerful people rarely need to explain themselves. When you stop feeling the need to correct everyone who doubts you, you gain something more valuable, your peace. That doesn't mean you accept disrespect. It simply means you choose how and when you respond. And sometimes, the best response is a smile. When you smile instead of snap, not instead of argue, think instead of lecture, you reclaim control of the moment. You say, I saw what you did, and I'm choosing grace instead of offense. That grace? That quiet confidence? It can shake a person more than any defensive outburst ever could. And more importantly, it protects you from carrying anger that was never yours to begin with. Let them think what they want. Let them assume. And when the time is right, let your quiet competence speak volumes. Because one of the greatest joys that comes with age is knowing this. You are not here to meet anyone's expectations but your own. You've already proven yourself through decades of work, love, survival, contribution. The people who truly matter already know your worth. And those who don't, you don't need to convince them. Their opinion changes nothing about your truth. Still, I know it hurts. Being underestimated chips away at your sense of identity if you let it. But here's your shield. Every time someone assumes you can't, you have the choice to show them, with patience, with poise, and with a strength that doesn't shout. So the next time someone explains the obvious to you, or offers help you didn't ask for, take a deep breath. You don't have to prove them wrong. You can just let time, and your actions, do the work. Because one day, they'll see you doing things they thought you couldn't, and realize the truth on their own. That moment? It's yours. And it's worth the wait. Before we move on, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been underestimated because of your age? How did you respond? If you've ever kept quiet and let your actions speak louder than your words, share that moment in the comments. Let's celebrate those quiet victories together. Now, speaking of quiet victories, let's talk about something else that can test our strength. What happens when conflict erupts within the family? Disagreements, tension, old wounds, they all find their way to the surface. And in those moments, the choice between reacting and rising above can define not just the moment, but your entire family dynamic. Let's talk about it. 3. When family arguments or tensions arise. Have you ever been pulled into a family argument and felt like the peacekeeper, the referee, and the emotional sponge all at once? Maybe you weren't even involved, but suddenly, all eyes turn to you as if your silence is the solution. It's strange, isn't it? As we age, we're often seen as the wise one, the stabilizer, the one who should fix everything, even when we never started the fire. I remember a woman I once counseled, Margaret, 78 years old, quiet but razor sharp. Her 2 grown sons hadn't spoken in 3 years over something neither could remember clearly. At Christmas, they sat on opposite sides of the table, arms folded, tension thick in the air. Everyone looked to her for the magic words to fix it. She simply smiled, served dessert, and said, "Your grandmother used to make this pie. I never figured out how she got the crust so perfect." That night, they didn't solve everything, but they laughed, and they ate. And for the first time in years, they talked, because she didn't force resolution. She created space for it. Family conflict in later life hits differently. It's not just about who's right anymore. It's about legacy. It's about protecting the very fabric of connection we've spent a lifetime building. And yet, when tensions arise between siblings, between children and parents, or even between generations, it can feel like you're being asked to mediate a war you didn't sign up for. You may feel pulled to jump in, to correct someone, to take a side. After all, you've lived long enough to see where certain paths lead. But sometimes, the most loving thing you can do is step back. Not out of indifference, but out of clarity. Because here's what I've learned over the years. Jumping into conflict rarely brings resolution. People in the heat of emotion aren't listening, they're defending. They don't need answers in that moment. They need time, and perspective, and space. When you step back, or better yet, when you appear gently detached, almost as if you don't quite notice the heat in the room, you do something powerful. You de-escalate. Instead of adding your voice to the tension, you become the calm in the storm. And no, this isn't pretending not to care. Quite the opposite. It's choosing the higher road. It's choosing peace over pride, patience over point-making. You can still say something meaningful. A simple phrase like, "It sounds like you both care a lot about this. I'm confident you'll figure it out." It validates their feelings, but refuses to feed the fire. That kind of presence? It lingers. It plants seeds of reconciliation long after the moment is past. Because family wounds are complicated. And when we respond with neutrality, we give others permission to soften, too. We model a better way, not with lectures, but with composure. And let's be honest, you've likely seen how time turns today's crisis into tomorrow's memory. You've watched the biggest fights fade into nothing but a story told years later with a chuckle. That's the gift of perspective, and it's yours to offer, without having to take sides. Of course, staying neutral doesn't mean staying silent forever. If your words can soothe, offer them. But if your voice will simply add more noise, let your silence become your wisdom. If you're watching this and feeling the weight of family tension, take heart. You don't have to fix everything. Sometimes, just being the steady presence in the room is enough. And if you've ever played that role, the calm observer, the quiet anchor, share your story in the comments. Others need to hear how restraint can be just as powerful as resolution. And if this moment speaks to you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe, because in the next part, we'll talk about something surprisingly tender: how to face the world of fast-changing technology without fear and even turn confusion into connection. Because let's face it, when apps, voice commands, and devices become overwhelming, it's not just a learning curve. It's a chance to bond with those who think we know less and show them how we learn with more heart than they ever expected. Let's keep going. 4. When you encounter technology you don't fully understand. Have you ever stared at a screen and felt like the machine was laughing at you? The phone that suddenly updates itself and looks nothing like it did yesterday. The remote with too many buttons. The app that was supposed to simplify your life, but somehow made you feel left behind. Technology changes fast, and it doesn't stop to ask if you're ready. But here's the truth. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by a new gadget or app, you're not alone. And it doesn't mean you're slow or out of touch or incapable. It means you grew up in a world where things were built to last, not to update every 3 weeks. Where a phone was something you used to hear a voice, not something you had to sync, pair, or restart. I once met a man named Henry, 82 years old, sharp as a tack. His grandson gifted him a smartwatch, which beeped, vibrated, and lit up every hour. After a week of trying to figure it out, Henry placed it gently in a drawer. "It's smarter than me," he chuckled, "but I'm better at keeping time." That's the kind of perspective that only comes with age. You see, when we encounter technology that feels confusing or overwhelming, our first instinct might be embarrassment, maybe even frustration. But what if we let go of the need to master every device? What if we approach technology not as something to conquer, but as something we can learn on our own terms? And here's where something unexpected happens. Pretending to be more lost than you are can actually bring you closer to others. Think about this. Asking your grandchild to explain how to use a new feature, even if you already halfway figured it out, gives them a chance to shine. It builds trust. It builds connection. It lets them feel useful and lets you be open. That simple phrase, "Can you show me how to do this?" becomes an invitation to bond across generations. This isn't about faking helplessness. It's about recognizing that asking for help isn't weakness, it's a bridge. It allows the younger generation to give back, to guide, to feel important. And it reminds them that learning never stops, especially for those wise enough to admit when they don't know something. And yes, there will be moments when the frustration is real, when something doesn't make sense, no matter how many tutorials you watch. In those moments, instead of beating yourself up, try this. Take a breath, smile, and say, "Well, I've learned harder things than this. What's one more?" Because you have. You've lived through wars, cultural shifts, economic crises, and the rise of the internet itself. You're not behind, you're evolving. Let the world catch up to your pace for once. And if that means not knowing how to change the Wi-Fi password or set up a new printer right away, so be it. That doesn't make you less capable. It just means your brain is filled with more meaningful memories than tech manuals. And that's a good trait. But here's something beautiful. Even when you don't understand the tool, you still know how to connect with people. Technology is just a tool. It's not the goal. The goal is to stay close to those you love. If asking for help with a phone leads to a conversation, a laugh, a moment of closeness, then the technology served its purpose. You don't need to be fluent in code or apps. You just need to be open to connection. And when you pretend not to know or admit confusion with a smile, you're not showing weakness, you're showing humility. You're showing courage. You're showing that learning never has an age limit. So the next time a device glitches, or a setting confuses you, or your grandchild rolls their eyes when you ask how to zoom out, just smile. You've figured out much harder things than this. You've raised families, balanced checkbooks by hand, survived loss, built legacies. That phone, that tablet, that software, it has nothing on you. And if this message resonates with you, if you've ever laughed at yourself while learning something new, or leaned into the joy of being the student again, leave a comment below. Tell us, what's one tech moment that surprised you, frustrated you, or brought you closer to someone you love? And don't forget to like and subscribe, because in the next section, we're shifting to something equally close to the heart. What to do when others criticize your lifestyle or choices in old age. Because the truth is, judgment doesn't stop when you reach a certain age, but neither does your right to live boldly, quietly, and entirely on your own terms. Let's continue. 5. When someone criticizes your lifestyle choices. Have you ever done something that made you feel alive, only to be met with a quiet judgment, a subtle frown, or a comment like, "Should you really be doing that at your age?" Maybe you booked a solo trip, bought something extravagant, signed up for painting classes, or started seeing someone new, and suddenly someone, often with good intentions, questions your decision like your joy requires their approval. There's a particular sting in being criticized for simply living your life, especially when you've spent decades building it. And often, the criticism doesn't come from strangers. It comes from loved ones, family members, even friends who believe they know what's best for you. As if growing older somehow invalidates your right to choose boldly, spend freely, and live deeply. But let's be clear, you've earned every single right to do what brings you peace and happiness. You don't owe anyone an explanation for how you choose to spend your time, your money, your energy, or your heart. I once met a woman named Teresa, 81 years old, who used part of her retirement savings to enroll in ballroom dance lessons. Her niece, hearing the news, said, "Wouldn't that money be better saved for medical emergencies?" Teresa smiled and replied, "If I don't dance now, I'll probably need that hospital bed sooner." That kind of answer doesn't just silence criticism, it reveals the quiet power of knowing who you are. And yet, even when we're confident in our decisions, criticism can still hurt. There's something deeply personal about having your lifestyle questioned, especially when your choices have been shaped by years of experience, sacrifice, and self-discovery. Whether it's your diet, your wardrobe, how you manage your finances, or simply how you spend a quiet Sunday, there always seems to be someone ready to weigh in. And in those moments, it's tempting to justify yourself, to explain your reasons, to defend your joy, to make them see your side. But here's a truth I want you to hold on to. You do not need to defend your happiness to anyone. Not anymore. Your life is not a courtroom. You are not on trial. At this stage of life, every choice you make is backed by a lifetime of knowing what does and does not serve your spirit. So instead of arguing, try saying this: "I hadn't thought of it that way. Thank you." Then go on doing what you were doing. Because that sentence, simple, soft, and unshaken, is often more powerful than any confrontation. It disarms without surrendering. It protects your peace without feeding the fire. Let people have their opinions. Let them think what they want. And then, let them go. Because their discomfort is not your responsibility. Often, what they criticize is not your action, but their own unfulfilled longing. Your freedom reminds them of the courage they haven't exercised. Your contentment highlights their unrest. And that's not something you need to carry. You've already carried more than your share in this life. Now, it's time to prioritize what brings you light. So go ahead, buy the shoes, plant the garden, eat the cake, start the hobby, make the call. Let your joy be loud, even if your response is quiet. Because when you choose to honor your own path, even in the face of disapproval, you model something beautiful, especially for the younger ones watching. You show them that aging doesn't mean fading. It means finally living without permission. And if you've ever stood in your truth, smiled through someone's unsolicited advice, or quietly chosen joy over justification, I invite you to share your story in the comments. Your courage may be exactly what someone else needs today. And if this message has stirred something in you, if you feel seen, validated, or simply reminded of your own quiet strength, don't forget to like the video and subscribe. Because in the next part, we're stepping into another kind of emotional test. What to do when conversations turn political, spiritual, or philosophical, and suddenly everyone's voices get louder, but no one seems to be listening. Sometimes, the wisest thing you can do is say nothing at all. Let's talk about it. 6. When arguments over politics, religion, or personal beliefs arise. Have you ever found yourself sitting at the dinner table, just wanting to enjoy a meal, when suddenly the conversation turns to politics, religion, or some deeply personal belief, and before you know it, voices rise, tempers flare, and you wonder if peace has quietly slipped out the back door? It happens in families all the time, especially across generations. What starts as a comment or opinion quickly becomes a battleground, and somehow you get pulled in, expected to choose a side, offer a solution, or play referee in a debate that nobody really wins. I remember a gentleman named Samuel, 83 years old, who once told me, "Every Thanksgiving, I sit back and watch my kids argue over things they can't control. They look at me like I'm supposed to say something wise, but I just pass the gravy and tell a story about the dog we had in '64. That, to me, is the epitome of grace under pressure. You see, when discussions about politics, faith, or morality erupt, it's not always about the topic. It's about the identity tied to it. People don't just argue to be right. They argue to be heard, validated, and respected. And when their views are challenged, they often hear it as a challenge to who they are. That's why these conversations escalate quickly. Logic disappears. Emotions take over. And suddenly, you're in a room full of people speaking louder, but listening less. Now, as someone who's seen the world change many times, you probably have strong opinions formed through decades of experience, observation, and reflection. And those perspectives matter. But here's the quiet truth many wise elders have learned. Not every truth needs to be spoken to be real. Sometimes, choosing not to engage is the most powerful and most loving thing you can do. Not because you don't care, but because you care enough not to damage relationships over something that likely won't be solved over turkey and stuffing. So when your nephew launches into a political rant, or your sister-in-law questions your beliefs, try this. Smile, breathe, and say, "You've clearly thought a lot about this. I respect that." Then gently change the subject. Offer a memory, a moment of laughter, a change of rhythm. These small redirections are not avoidance, they're emotional leadership. They say, "I value peace more than pride." And more often than not, others will follow your lead. Because you've lived long enough to know that being right is not always being wise. That protecting harmony often means sacrificing the last word. And that in most cases, people remember how you made them feel far more than what you believed. Think about it. Do you really want someone you love to remember you as the person who won the argument, or the one who preserved the relationship? Of course, there may be moments when speaking up is necessary, when silence feels like complicity. In those rare cases, choose your words with intention. Speak with calm, not contempt. With curiosity, not combat. And remember that your wisdom, delivered softly, carries more weight than 1,000 shouting matches. But more often, silence is strength. It's the stillness of someone who doesn't need to prove their point to know their value. Someone who's learned that peace isn't weakness, it's maturity. And if you've ever chosen silence in the face of provocation, if you've ever smiled instead of snapping, or walked away instead of wading into the heat, I want you to know you made the stronger choice. And if that resonates with you, share your story in the comments. What's one time you chose peace over pride? One moment where your quiet made more impact than noise ever could? And if this part of the video speaks to you, don't forget to like and subscribe, because in the next section, we'll dive into something just as delicate, but even more personal: what to do when someone tries to take advantage of your kindness. Because while generosity is a gift, protecting it is a responsibility. Let's explore how to stay kind without becoming a target. 7. When someone tries to take advantage of your kindness. Have you ever had someone ask you for a favor, and something in your gut whispered, "This doesn't feel right," but you said yes anyway, just to keep the peace? Maybe it was a relative needing money just this once, a neighbor expecting more help than you could comfortably give, or even a friend who always seemed to call when they wanted something, but never just to check in. It's a strange and painful realization that sometimes the very kindness you offer becomes the reason others see you as an opportunity, not a person. As we age, we often become more generous, not just with time or money, but with patience, listening, understanding. And while that's a beautiful gift, it can also become a vulnerability, especially to those who have learned how to manipulate empathy for their own gain. The danger is subtle. It doesn't always look like cruelty. Sometimes it wears the face of family, or friendship, or politeness. But underneath the surface, there's pressure, guilt, and quiet coercion. And if we're not careful, we begin to confuse being kind with being available all the time to everyone. But here's something I want you to remember. Kindness is not the same as compliance. And compassion does not mean self-sacrifice. There's nothing wrong with giving, but giving under pressure, or from guilt, or because we're afraid to say no. That's not generosity, that's surrender. I remember speaking with a man named Walter, a retired teacher in his 70s, who once said, "I never minded helping. but I began to notice people only showed up when they needed something. And I let it happen. I didn't want to seem difficult. It wasn't until he started pretending not to hear the phone sometimes, or taking longer to respond to messages, that things changed. It's funny, he told me. When they realized I wasn't so easy to access anymore, most of them disappeared. That's when he understood. It wasn't his friendship they valued. It was his availability. Sometimes, pretending not to understand or hesitating just a little before responding is not about being deceptive. It's about creating space to listen to your own instincts. If a request feels rushed, manipulative, or framed in a way that makes no sound cruel, pause. Say something simple, like, "Let me think about it." That sentence gives you back your power. It puts you in control of the decision, instead of the emotions others are trying to place on your shoulders. Because here's what people who manipulate kindness often count on: your discomfort. They expect that you'll feel guilty, that you won't want to hurt their feelings, that you'll choose nice over honest. But when you practice restraint, when you take a breath instead of giving an automatic yes, you disrupt that pattern. And you begin to protect something far more important than your image, your energy. That's what this really comes down to. Your energy is sacred. It has limits, and not everyone deserves access to it. Setting boundaries is not cruelty, it's wisdom. You can still be kind without being exploited. You can still care deeply while saying, "Not this time." And yes, some people won't like that change. Some will accuse you of being selfish, distant, even cold. Let them. Their discomfort is not your responsibility. Because the people who truly respect you will understand that your kindness isn't a resource to be drained. It's a treasure to be appreciated. And they'll treat it as such. So the next time someone comes to you with an urgent ask, and something inside you says, "This doesn't feel fair," listen. Give yourself permission to pause, to delay, to not know what you'll do yet. You don't owe an immediate answer. You owe yourself the dignity of time. And if you've ever drawn a line to protect your peace, no matter how small, I hope you take a moment to feel proud. That wasn't selfish. That was wise. And if you feel like sharing, drop a comment below. What's one time you chose to guard your kindness instead of giving it away? You never know who you'll inspire to do the same. And if this part of the video resonated with you, if you've ever felt the weight of being the reliable one, the always available one, please like and subscribe. Because in the final part of this video, we're bringing everything full circle. We'll explore how these quiet acts of patience, restraint, and choosing when to speak aren't just ways to survive old age. They're how you build a lasting legacy of strength, grace, and self-respect. Let's reflect together, because growing older isn't about fading. It's about choosing how brightly and how wisely you shine. If you've made it this far in the video, then you already understand something most people overlook, that real strength doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. Sometimes it simply chooses to stay silent. In a world that celebrates being loud, fast, and always on, choosing calm, stillness, and restraint is not weakness, it's radical courage. Because it means you stop living on other people's terms. You started choosing which conversations deserve your energy and which ones don't. Over the past few minutes, we've walked through situations that challenge not just your patience, but your sense of identity. Being left out of decisions, being underestimated, pulled into family drama, struggling with technology, criticized for how you live, pushed to argue about beliefs, taken for granted because of your kindness. And in each of these moments, the world expects you to react, to fight, to explain, to prove. But you've learned something more powerful. You don't have to respond to everything to remain strong. There's dignity in choosing your battles. There's wisdom in waiting for the right time to speak. And there's quiet, steady power in letting others underestimate you, while you keep your peace. You see, silence is not the absence of words. It's the presence of control. Stillness is not an action. It's intentional action. And peace? Peace is not passive. It's fiercely protected. That protection may come in the form of a soft smile instead of a harsh comeback, a gentle nod instead of an argument, a pause instead of a reaction. These may look small on the outside, but on the inside, they are monumental shifts. They are moments where you reclaim control over how you live, love, and lead in this stage of life. And I know being silent isn't always easy, especially when you're being misunderstood, underestimated, or dismissed. But here's the truth that age teaches us. You don't need to be loud to be heard. You don't need to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. And you don't need to carry battles that drain your joy. Every time you chose stillness over chaos, every time you walked away instead of engaging, every time you gave your silence instead of your outrage, you were doing something profound. You were protecting your peace, And in a world where drama is loud and dignity is rare, that choice makes you a quiet warrior. There's an old saying that goes, "The oak tree does not fear the wind. It simply bends." That's what this stage of life is about, not proving you're unbreakable, but showing that you are unshakable. And unshakable strength doesn't live in how fast you respond, it lives in how calmly you choose not to. So if you've ever let someone believe they won a conversation, just so you could win your peace. If you've ever smiled through a condescending comment, knowing it said more about them than you. If you've ever paused before reacting and found in that pause your power, then you already know this. You are not weak. You are wise. And the world needs more of that wisdom. You are proof that a full life isn't measured by how many people you impressed, but by how many moments you lived aligned with who you truly are. You're living your truth now, not out of rebellion, but out of a deep respect for yourself, for your time, for your peace. So here's what I'd love. If any part of this video resonated with you, if you saw yourself in any of these stories, or remembered a moment when silence was your strongest move, please let me know in the comments. What's one time you chose stillness over speaking or peace over pride? Your story may be the exact encouragement someone else needs right now. And if you found value here, if you feel even a little bit more understood, more empowered, or more at ease with how you move through this stage of life, please like this video and subscribe to the channel. That simple action helps us reach more people who need these kinds of quiet but powerful reminders. It tells the algorithm what we already know, that these stories matter. Because the truth is, growing older isn't about becoming invisible. It's about becoming intentional. It's about knowing who you are, what matters, and what you're no longer willing to carry. It's about embracing the quiet strength you've built over a lifetime and walking forward, not to prove anything to the world, but simply to live as the fullest, truest version of yourself. Thank you for sharing your time and attention today. You are wise. You are powerful. And your silence? It speaks volumes. Until next time, take care, stay kind, and never underestimate the quiet strength within you.